Hi there. Welcome to Apple World. So it was a ton of those sort of components in there, where individuals just once in a while simply ruin something worth being thankful for. No doubt, because they realize like you all would be together if not for me. You got to dare to find Steve Harvey and say, "Steve, sir, show me how you did it. Show me how you made it with no ability." Bernie said I walk alone. He said that all the time. We've heard it multiple times in meetings, and everything. Cedric the performer, one of the first lords of satire, is uncovering stunning new insights regarding Steve Harvey's problem with the late Bernie Mac, and keeping in mind that Steve beforehand conceded he and Bernie butted heads. It turns out Steve likewise did something extremely subtle to attack Bernie's vocation. Out of the three living individuals, from the first rulers of satire, Steve Harvey is the person who partakes in the most popularity and cash yet. Does that mean he was the most entertaining one? Well, many fans would contradict this. And while we can't detract from Steve, the way that he buckles down reports about him stepping on individuals and doing some sketchy business in the background to push forward have been twirling for quite a long time, and after Cedric the performer as of late focused on Steve's problem with the late Bernie Mac, new subtleties re-emerged about how Steve was purportedly doing the most to disrupt Bernie's vocation, and a few fans are in any event venturing to such an extreme as to guarantee that Steve forfeited Bernie for popularity. However, what precisely did Cedric uncover about Steve detesting on Bernie? Did Steve genuinely attempt to undermine Bernie's profession? We should get into it like, okay brother, no one coming to see you. It's an obvious fact that television have Steve Harvey and parody legend Bernie Mac didn't completely agree during their rulers of satire days. Anyway, some stunning reports as of late showed up in the media about Steve effectively attempting to disrupt Bernie's vocation and get him boycotted in Hollywood. And these accounts are quite upsetting when you contemplate how Steve cried at Bernie's burial service and the way in which he actually discusses him like they were companions. Additionally upsetting that Bernie himself straightforwardly blamed Steve for disrupting him. But Steve figured out how to hide this away from plain view. So back in 2003, Bernie did a meeting with GQ magazine and accused Steve of being envious of him and attempting to take different film jobs from him, including C's 11, as per the GQ article. Somebody from Steve's group called the C's 11 chief Stephen Bind BG and attempted to push for Steve to get the part over Bernie. When asked how he felt when he found out about this, Bernie told GQ that the Hollywood game that we are in is a virus game. Bernie then proceeded to offer something extremely fascinating about how superstars with regards to Hollywood are controlled, and he made sense of why he would have rather not gone as far as that level and fight back. The miserable thing about it is that we are all getting along admirably, so I don't actually see the issue. It didn't annoy me since I appreciate the situation from start to finish. Bernie said when they educated me. What might I at some point do? I won't sling mud. I'm not a rapper. I make wisecracks. I attempt to make individuals snicker. I won't sling mud. Steve and any other person can express what they might be thinking. No one oversaw me. I have control. Bernie too blamed Steve for being an egomaniac and expressed his desire to return and take a gander at the rulers of satire tapes. At whatever point he presented his pal Cedric the performer, everything revolved around himself. No doubt I realized about it. Did it irritate me? Nah, you can't irritate me. You ain't that great. After this, Bernie acknowledged exactly how tricky individuals can be, the point at which they're frantic for distinction and achievement, and he chose to limit any association with Hollywood. There wasn't a thing for me out there, Bernie told GQ, and alluding to his significant other and little girl, he added, I had the best here at home anyway. When Steve was subsequently gotten some information about Bernie's remarks from the GQ article, he denied everything. Furthermore, said he was furious with Bernie for saying all that. In 2010, 2 years after Bernie died from complexities of pneumonia, Steve showed up on discussions with Ed Gordon, and when gotten some information about Bernie blaming him for attempting to take his film jobs, Steve said I was agitated with first, since it simply wasn't accurate. Me and Bernie had a ton of great times together, and afterward, this article in GQ emerged and put this load of horrendous stuff in there, so Steve essentially attempted to make it seem to be GQ misrepresent the entire circumstance and took Bernie's words outside the current discussion anyway. GQ straightforwardly cited Bernie, and Bernie needed to have supported the meeting before it was distributed, so it seemed like Steve was simply gaslighting the general population and attempting to persuade Everybody that his quarrel with Bernie wasn't that serious, however, as per different sources who were there to observe Steve's obscure moves. It was that significant, and Steve developed his prosperity by sucky. And to the Hollywood top dogs while blaming everything on his companion's joke artist Corey Haim, who used to open for Bernie as of late went off on Steve and said he never merited being the main event over Bernie and Cedric. And he just got that honor since he kissed up to Makers, the performer, and Bernie Mac was interesting, and afterward you needed to go up after them and you were unable to control it like you needed to, so you turned into the host, and this is really an exceptionally fascinating point. And in light of the fact that initially Steve was the nearer anyway, this didn't work for Steve, in light of the fact that once Bernie was done, individuals were prepared to leave the theater and nobody needed to pay attention to Steve's jokes. After this, they improved the setup and made Steve the have. Yet as per Corey Hulse, the main explanation, Steve figured out how to get the situation help out him out, was on the grounds that he kissed up to the perfect individuals you really want to find a useful comic who made it, and ask him, how would you need to get it, despite the fact that I can see you, is either kiss young men Steve Harvey kissed ass. That is the way he got it. Everyone thinks Steve Harvey's some stand-up man. He kissed ass. Steve Harvey is in a place of significance right now since he knows how to get up under. And it's not simply Corey who thinks Steve is a snake who advanced toward the top by tossing individuals under the transport. Kathy Hughes, who established the media organization Radio 1 and gave Steve his public broadcast, said in a meeting that Steve is likely perhaps of the most discourteous, careless individual she had at any point run over in her life, and afterward obviously there's Monique, who likewise got down on Steve for blaming everything on her after she told the world Oprah attempted to repudiate her. As per Monique, Steve told her in confidential that he concurred with her, however at that point he went on air and hammered Monique for being discourteous and copying an excessive number of scaffolds. Obviously Monique felt absolutely manipulated on the grounds that Steve pulled a subtle move, behaving like he had her covered in secret, as it were, to freely humiliate her. Yet, when Monique called Steve out on it, he backpedaled and said he was simply attempting to tell her she didn't communicate her dissatisfactions right way. Monique anyway didn't move, and she let Steve in on he ought to have told the truth, as opposed to blaming everything on her before everybody. What I would have adored and appreciated from my sibling was had you gotten the telephone before you went on the air and said, Monique, you've severed such a large number of ties and there's nothing I can do. I would have appreciated it had my sibling hit me up and said, child, we should talk, since you doing that was a piece of me being troublesome. Now returning to Bernie Mac, many fans accept that this is precisely the way in which Steve treated Bernie, imagining he was his companion. However, at that point, despite his good faith, he attempted to undermine his profession. And presently, Cedric the performer has apparently affirmed this and said that if not for Steve beefing with Bernie, they would have made a Lords of Satire continuation anyway. Steve evidently couldn't deal with perceiving how individuals cherished Bernie and how easy he was in front of an audience. Is it genuine that Steve and Bernie grew? I mean, you realize they were the sort of folks that the two of them were extremely confident men. You know, like the two of them. You realize they just saw it differently. Is that one reason why you didn't do? You did the F, you did the initial segment, did the second part, I don't think. I think you obviously, that was you, realize most certainly a contributing situation. Fans are currently saying this all comes down to Steve feeling undermined by Bernie in light of the fact that he needed to